we got Bo to come in, so that's great. So anyway, we're going to take a look at something maybe a little different than normal, and we're going to look at. Let me see. How do I get to the next slide here? There we go. Improve your lead generation. And what we want to do is we want to improve the lead generation techniques, right? Here's the biggest thing that happens in I think people's lives is one of the things is the biggest gap that we have to deal with is what we know and what we do. And if you think about what we know how to pick up the phone, we know how to hand out a business card, we know how to do the things that we're supposed to do to generate income, to generate leads. But yet here it is, this huge gap that is what we know and what we do. And what we want to do is we want to begin to narrow that gap. Here's something to take a look at and understand, is that as we grow up and we get older, we become fixed in our ways. We become habitual creatures, if you will. So when anything new comes down the road, anything that is out of the ordinary or maybe not normal to our way of thinking, a lot of times we disregard it, or there's a switch within inside of us that we just shut it off. So we want to take a look at this as far as like what it means. What is the biggest problem with most typical lead generation strategies? A lot of times people are doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over again, and they're not getting the results that they want. And so what happens is we have to shift something up. We have to change it. Now, this webinar is going to be a webinar that is just going to touch on some things and hopefully give you some one or two that you can take away that will change your whole world, okay? So the biggest problem with most typical lead generation strategies or with sales, whatever it is that you're doing, is paradigms. So what's a paradigm? Paradigm is, if we can simplify what a paradigm is, paradigms are a bunch of habits that are strung together, okay? So the way you put your pants on in the morning, the way you brush your teeth, the way you take a shower, the way you eat your food, the way you communicate with people, what happens is we develop this paradigm, and what we have to do is we have to learn how to change the paradigm, because that's the operating system within us, okay? So what's the solution? We need to understand why we do the things that we do and the blocks that stand in front of us. So we can see the blocks, can't we? Sometimes we can see what's in front of us. We can see that area that holds us back, that really begins to, as we move forward into an unfamiliar territory, that block comes up. Money is a big one, and usually in people's lives, when you have to give money for something that you want, a lot of times if there's not enough value there, you're not going to give that money away, right? Think about investing in yourself. Think about investing in your life and in your business and in your future. A lot of times we will take vacations and we will do a lot of different other things, but we won't invest a lot of money here. I've invested thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars up here, and I believe it's paid off a little bit. So what's the solution? We need to understand why we do the things we do and the blocks that stand in front of us, okay? Here's things that, think about this. We do things habitually, okay? I don't know if you've ever heard the story of the ham. It's a cute story, but it really begins to bring an understanding of why we do the things we do and why we keep hitting the same blocks and why we can't overcome them. It's because of culture. It's because of tradition. It's because of tribe. They've handed down these certain tribal principles. And as you get older, some of those tribal principles don't work. So what's the story of the ham? There was a little girl helping her mom in the kitchen at Thanksgiving dinner. And as her mom took out the ham, her mom cut both ends of the ham off and stuck it in the pan. And her daughter looked at her kind of puzzled and says, why are you cutting the ends of the ham off? She goes, I don't know. That's the way my mom always did it. Why don't you call your grandmother up and ask her? So she called up her grandmother and she says, Grandma, you know, we're making Thanksgiving dinner here. And mom cut off the ends of the ham and stuck it in the pan. She says, why did you do that? She says, well, honey, my pan was too small. And isn't that interesting? And so it's a cute little story, but it demonstrates a powerful point is that they were doing that and they didn't even know why they were doing it. Yeah. So how can you increase your cash flow to really begin to understand lead generation and really begin to move into that and understand the blocks, maybe the fears that you have? How can you increase your cash flow? Okay, awareness is everything. If you don't know what I'm holding in my hand, if you can't see it, you're not aware that I have anything in my hand. You can take guesses, a pen, a phone, a plug-in, whatever it is. But until I lift it up here, right? If you can see that, I'm not sure if you can or not. But if I lift it up here, all of a sudden it's a baseball. It's one of those little squishy stress balls, right? And so, but you don't know what that is. You don't know the shape. You don't know what it looks like until you begin to raise your level of awareness. Okay? What that does is we need to clarify and define your goals. So here's a really interesting story. Think about this. How do we make it from point A to point B? If you don't know where you're at in point A, how are you going to get to point B? And I share this story a lot of times, but it's powerful and it's on my testimonial page. If you go to my testimonial page and look at it, you'll see Paul Johnson's testimony there about where he almost lost his wife. His wife had one foot out the door after 25 years of marriage. He had no clue whatsoever. I'd been coaching him for well over 2 years, and there's a whole story behind that. I don't have time to get into it, but here's the thing. He didn't know what A was and how in the world is he going to get to B. If his friends came over and says, man, why don't you start working on your marriage? He's going to look at them and say, what are you talking about? So how do you get to point A if you don't know what point B is? You have to know what point B is or A is, because that's what awareness is all about. Awareness brings you to an understanding of, oh my gosh, if I'm going to change the way I'm doing things, I have to change the way I think. If you don't change the way you think, nothing changes. I love what Wayne Dyer says, when you change the way you look at a thing, the thing you look at changes. Yeah? So how can we improve our time management skills? You hear this a lot. It was a buzzword back in I think it was 80s or whatever it was. But time management. What is time management? Here's something to realize. One very important fact, okay, is you cannot manage time. We all have 24 hours in a day, and we're trying to struggle how to manage this time, and we're racing against the clock and everything else. What we want to do is everybody has 24 hours in a day. What we want to do is we want to manage, what we can manage is our activities. Think about that. You can manage your activities. You cannot manage time, but yet somebody put it in our head that we're going to try to manage time. You'll get frustrated every time. Yeah? So as we begin to learn how to manage activities, how could you do that? How can you manage activities? Well, here's the thing. You're going to do the same thing over and over tomorrow like you did today. The next day, you're going to do the same thing over and over and over again until you change something. So write this down, and many of you have heard this in the past, is the fact that write down 6 income producing activities that you can manage. Think about the first one, income producing activities. If you begin to lay out number 1, maybe it's making phone calls in the morning for 2 hours. Maybe number 2 is whatever that might be. Maybe it's going out and knocking on doors. Maybe number 3 is this. So when you get the 6 done, what you want to do is you want to put them in the order of importance. So you want to put number 1 if it's phone calls, or if it's knocking on doors, whatever that is, you want to put that in number 1. And then when you wake up the next morning, you do number 1, and you don't do anything else until you finish number 1. Now, I understand there's going to be things and activities and different things that'll try to grab a hold of you. That's the important piece that you're going to have to stay focused. Okay. Okay. If paradigms are holding us back, how can we change our paradigms? Right. I want to share some things with you that might be a little different than normal. That, like I said in the past, that we have these ideas of what life is all about. We have these ideas what our thinking process and all of these different things. So what we want to take a look at is something. Let's take a look at how we arrive on the scene. Okay. Think about when you're a child, when you're a baby. All right, this here, when you're a baby, the top half of the conscious mind there, with the little antennas, you can hear, see, smell, taste, and touch. With a baby's mind, that's not there. That's your reasoning factor. Okay, so a baby doesn't have the reasoning factors until around 6 years of age. What do I mean by that? Well, let's take a 2-year-old little kid. And if that 2-year-old little kid kicks a ball out into the street and there's traffic going 100 miles an hour, that little child does not have the reasoning faculties to go and not chase that ball. He's going to run after that ball. He doesn't even have a clue that those trucks and cars can squish him like a bug. He has no clue whatsoever. So as we're vulnerable, if you will, as a baby is a linguistic genius. If you think about a child that's a linguistic genius, you can take a Japanese baby out of the home in Japan and bring him over to America and stick him in a Texas home, and that little Japanese baby will learn an English language with a Texas accent. Linguistic genius. So think about images, thoughts, and ideas that were going on around you when you were growing up. Think about these things, the thoughts of people. Maybe they said bad things about people that were rich. The people who get rich, man, they're always scamming, they're always liars, they're always this. You can't trust them. Maybe the thoughts are maybe a woman should just be her part was in the kitchen, and that a child shouldn't be heard or listened to. You know what I mean? So all these different thoughts of ideas of Democrats, Republican, what we eat for Thanksgiving, and on and on and on. Think about the images that you were picking up as a child. Think about the ideas that you were picking up as a child. What happens is those ideas come right into your subconscious part of your mind. This is the operating system. And ideas become fixed in there. When those ideas become fixed in there, what they do is they develop habits. As they develop these habits, it becomes conditioned. Okay, listen to this very carefully. What is happening here is these fixed ideas and these habits and this condition and these paradigms, what you're doing is you're creating your self-image. Your self-image then creates a paradigm. It's how we view the world. Paradigms control everything. Paradigms control finances, social life, work life, everything. It controls everything. Why? Because if you look back in your life and you begin to see the things that you do today were formed when you were a child. All the thoughts, images, and ideas that were going on was forming your paradigm. Okay? So let's look at this. Here you are as a child. Here I am as a child. We're on the scene. We come into this world screaming and kicking and crying. And as we get a little older, what happens is our parents, they had us. But what happens is you go down the generations and look at your grandparents. And let's go all the way back to maybe our great-grandparents. Think about that generation, the great-grandparents. Well, if you're 20 years old, your great-grandparents, they might have been in the Depression area. But I'm 65, so my great-grandparents were probably back in the Civil War times, And if you think about how your great-grandparents grew up and the tradition and the culture and the tribe that they had, Well, what happens is this. All these ideas that are fixed within their subconscious part of their mind, what happens is they have your grandparents. All of these ideas, all of these tribal behaviors and these principles and different things that begin to come down into your great grandparents, think about that time in their life, and they have your grandparents. What happens is all of those ideas come down into your grandparents. Then what happens is your grandparents grow up and they have your parents. All of a sudden, all of those ideas in that tribe, if they broke away from the tribe, if they changed, think about religion. Think about the different attitudes and behaviors and thoughts about religion. I mean, that's a big one in itself. And politics. Think about these different things. And so all of a sudden it comes down and they have you, and boom, here it comes. These two different sides. So we begin to ask ourselves, why do we do the things that we do? Why do we work the way we work? Let me share a cute little story that we lived in Oregon. We lived there for 20 years. And when you made potato salad, now this might sound silly, okay, but it is so powerful about the ham story, cut off the end. Same thing with me. We all have these stories. And so what happened was, if you made potato salad or turkey sandwiches or whatever, you used Best Foods mayonnaise. Nothing else. That's what we didn't use Miracle Whip. Miracle Whip was gross. We used Best Foods mayonnaise. And so what happened was, when we moved from Oregon to Greenville, South Carolina, after we got the boxes in and everything else, we went down to the grocery store to get some groceries. And what happened was, we're looking in the mayonnaise section, and I'm looking all over the place. And finally, this person comes by that works there, and I says, "Where's your Best Foods mayonnaise?" And he says, we don't carry Best Foods mayonnaise. We don't even know what that is. We carry Duke's or Hellman's. Well, I about had a coronary right there. I about fell off my chair. I says, "You don't carry Best Foods mayonnaise." Here's the extreme that I went to. I called up a friend of mine and I said, "Get the biggest jar of Best Foods mayonnaise that you have and send it to us." Well, I've recently, you adapt, don't you? Now it's Duke's mayonnaise. You might be saying, "No, it's not Duke's, it's Hellman's." Who cares? It's your tribe, it's your tradition. I like Duke's right now. But I had to adapt to that culture. I had to adapt to that change. So let's take a look at your lead generation techniques, your cash flow. Let's take a look at areas that you want to go to, and you want to reach this area financially in your life, whatever that area is. Maybe that area is making $250,000 a year. Maybe it's $500,000 a year. Maybe it's $1 million a year. And so you know how many homes that you have to sell. You know how many business-wise. I know what I need to do for clients, right? I know how many clients I need to have to get to that place. So let's make a real stretch here. Let's say that you're making $100,000 right now, and you want to add a figure that scares the living daylights out of you. And so maybe it's $250,000, maybe it's $300,000. Okay. So what happens is we get used to that $100,000, and we're going to look at something called the comfort zone and the terror barrier, and why you continue to go back to the place that's comfortable to you, because it is comfortable. This is what you know. So we're going to look at something, that X in your subconscious mind and the X in your body and the X outside with the R there. The R represents results. The X is, don't put a judgment to it. It's not a negative or a positive. It's just X-type thinking, okay? So you have these X-type thinking. It comes down into the subconscious part of your mind, and it manifests into the physical world, which produces what we call results. So if you want better results, what do most people do? They go to seminars, they go to workshops, they might go to BOLD, which is a phenomenal organization and training. They go to these different things, And what happens is they go to these things, and they in the back of the room, if there's books that they're selling or programs, they're going to fill up the books, they're going to fill up the programs. Tony Robbins said that only 10% of the people, when they buy his product, open the product. The rest of them are in plastic and they're on the shelves, or they sell them eventually in a garage sale. Okay? So we want better results. And so you go to some place and they say, what you need to do is make 100 calls. You need to make 100 calls a day. You need to continually make that 100, and you need to this, and you need that. And I get that. I understand that. I know that's important. But what happens is if we're not careful, what happens is we begin to fall into the category of thinking that if we do something a certain way, that things are going to change. Let me show you how powerful this is. That I hope when you got on this call, I hope that you kind of cleared your mind. Because what happens is we come in with eyes that are judgmental, because we know what we're doing, we know what we've got going on. But yet, if you look at the pattern in your life, it's pretty much the same. If you're going to change something drastic, you have to begin to really think differently and act differently. Why do people in industries like insurance, plumbing, self-employed, real estate companies, there's a huge category that only makes a certain percent. They're doing pretty good, but they're living pretty much hand to mouth. Then you've got a percentage up here that they're doing really well. Maybe they're $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 people. Then you got this sliver right here that owns most of the money. We're all selling the same product. What's going on? People that are successful do things that other people don't want to do. Let me say that again. People that are successful do things that other people don't want to do. James Allen said this. He said, until thought is linked with purpose, there is no intelligent accomplishment. So, for instance, like if I took this here, if you can see what's in my hand right now, it's my phone. I'm going to say this is a bar of steel, okay? This bar of steel, I have an idea. I have a thought. And that idea is I want this bar of steel to float. So in front of me is a tub of water. And I'm going to take that tub of water, and I'm going to take this steel, this bar of steel, and I'm going to begin to lay it on this water, and I'm going to let go of it. And I want this to float. 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 And I let go of it. What does it do? It sinks. Until thought is linked with purpose, there is no intelligent accomplishment. So until I wrap my mind around why do I want that steel to float, that steel is never going to float until I begin to understand the purpose. Maybe it's to protect our shorelines. Maybe it's to have a cruise line with 6,000 people on it. All of a sudden, when you begin to understand your purpose, you begin to think completely differently, and you look at the puzzle in a different light. So let's take a look at this, okay? Here's the comfort zone, just the R-type results. And then all of a sudden, we get this why idea. It's an outside idea. We get this idea that we want to maybe move to another country, or we want to move to another home, or we want to start our own business, or maybe we want to take our real estate business to a whole nother level, right? And so what happens is you get this why idea, and this why idea comes down into this conscious part of your mind, which this is your thinking part, okay? This is where we wish. Nothing really happens here. This is where our free will is. So we take this why idea, and notice it doesn't come down into the subconscious part of your mind, which is your operating system. So as we begin to entertain this, we hit this thing called a terror barrier. That scares the living daylights out of us. But as we entertain this why idea, that second part is reason. We begin to reason why we can do something, or we begin to reason why we can't do something. But if we move forward and we begin to say, you know what, I think this is a great idea, and that why idea comes down into the subconscious part of your mind and into the body, which where it manifests into physical form. Now listen to this. The X is still there. That X type thinking is still there. So when you bring that new idea in and that Y idea begins to have conflict towards that X type thinking, what this does is it really begins to develop this thing called worry, fear, and anxiety. It really begins to bring up this strange feeling. So when we have an idea that is going to maybe revolutionize our family or revolutionize our life, or maybe take us to that whole nother level, right? And we really want to do that. What happens is this very strange feeling when you can begin to relate to where you take big leaps or you take big ideas and you begin to move towards them and you do it afraid. What happens is understand this is part of the process. We begin to worry, we begin to fear, it manifests in physical form and anxiety. You know what anxiety does? Why do you think people are taking all the drugs that they're taking today? Because the anxiety that they have are so overwhelming. Well, when you understand the process, when you understand what's going on, all of a sudden now this strange feeling, that must mean I'm moving in the right direction because I'm feeling this fear and this worry and this anxiety, so I must be moving in the right direction. Here's what happens to most people. It's happened to me many times. What happens is we hit this wall called the terror barrier, and what normally happens is we go what? We go right back to here. Comfort. Why do we go back to comfort? Because it's our best food's mayonnaise. It's why we cut off the ends of the ham. We don't know why. It just makes us comfortable because that's the way my grandmother did it, or my mother did it, or my father did it. We go back to this place called comfort. Yeah. So if you think about it, there's a great story that a guy told me one time about bell peppers. He loved bell peppers. He still does to this day. When he was a little kid, he used to ride on the handle and put his feet on the cart there, and his mom would push it, and so he was right there in the back of the cart, and he was riding, and they'd go by the vegetables, and he'd say, "Mama, can we get some bell peppers? Can we get some bell peppers?" And his mom would say every time they went to the grocery store, he asked this question. And she said, "No, honey, they're too expensive. No, honey, they're too expensive. No, honey, they're too expensive." Over and over and over. That was a part of their culture. That's part of their tribe. They can't afford bell peppers because it's too expensive. So as he's an adult now and his business is going 100 miles an hour, he normally doesn't stop at the grocery store. His wife normally takes care of that. Just that's the agreement and the arrangement that they have. And all of a sudden, his wife calls up and says, "Honey, can you stop and get some milk? I need some milk," and blah, blah, blah. And so he goes and he goes to the grocery store, which he normally doesn't go to, and he's going to get some milk. Well, he walks by the vegetable department and he sees these bell peppers. And he goes, "Whoa, that looks," and he throws in about 2 or 3 bell peppers in his bag. He puts them in the cart, and as he begins to walk away, there's a voice in his head that says, "What are you doing? Those are too expensive. We can't afford them." And without even thinking about it, true story, he turned his cart, he picked up the bag of bell peppers, he was going to put them back, and it dawns on him, he goes, "Wait a minute. Stop the horses. Why in the world am I going to put them back?" He's made lots of money to where he could buy lots of bell peppers. But my point is this, we go right back to comfort. Why? Because our paradigm says so. It's a bunch of habits strung together. So if we're going to break a habit, you've heard it a million times, it's tough. We have to break away from the crowd and move towards that thing that we want. Clarify your goals. Move into a place where you begin to act as if you're already in possession of what you want. So let's take a look at this terror barrier, okay? Here's this thing called freedom on the other side. This is freedom that that why do people buy homes? Why do they buy homes? There's people that buy homes all the time, right? There, you sell people homes. And as you sell these homes, what does that home represent to them? See, a lot of times you're not selling a home, you're selling an idea. I love what Bob Proctor said. He said people that sell products raise skinny kids. But people that sell products understand and they move into success. If you ask a real estate person, the majority of time in their mind, what they sell is homes. You don't sell homes, you sell an idea. Think about what that idea means to a lot of people. To have their own home means freedom. To have their own home means safety. It means security. Think about living in a nice neighborhood with a fenced yard and you got little kids, and think about how your clients feel when they get those keys and they go through all the hoops and they finally get their house, right? But maybe their house is out of their reach and they just can't grab a hold of it. Whether it's the home, whether it's the money, whatever it is, and put your thing in that category. Because what you want to do is you want to break across this wall called the terror barrier into freedom. So what happens is why idea comes down and we're gonna crack at it. We're gonna move. But see, the X is still there. That X type thinking, the paradigm is still there, right? And so we hit it again and we hit it again. And guess what? One day what happens is we come to this place and all of a sudden we hit that, we just say one more time, just one more time. You've heard this story, 3 Feet from Gold. It's in the book by Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. It was a guy by the name, I believe, Darby. And he went, and this was back in the gold rush days, and he wanted to go get some gold and strike it rich and everything else. And so he went, and as he went to the west, and he claimed this mine, and he started digging, and they all of a sudden they hit a vein, and they started producing gold. So he went back to his his relatives and his friends, and he borrowed money to get the machinery to really begin to move into this vein and pull all this ore out, this gold. They were really excited. And as they were digging, the gold was coming out, and all of a sudden, the gold ran out. And as this gold ran out, they got frustrated. They didn't know what to do. And so what they did was they sold all of their equipment to a junk man. It was a junk dealer. They sold all of his equipment to a junk dealer. And they went on back east. They went back home. Well, you know what this junk dealer did? He wasn't stupid. What this junk dealer did was he got this guy that understood veins and understood how the veins work in the mountains. And as this guy came in, he hired a consultant or a coach, if you will. And this guy came in and he began to check it out. And he says, you know, he said they were 3 feet from one of the richest gold mines in the United States. Where are you at? How close are you to breaking through that wall again? How close are you? One more time. One more time. But you have to do something different. You have to change the way you think. You can't think the same way, because what will happen is you'll come right back to comfort. And so if you think of that why idea, what happens is all of a sudden now you hit it again. Guess what? That X leaves. The strangeness and the fear and the worry and the doubt. All of a sudden you went through all the hoops to get your home, and they handed you the key. You signed the last document, and you and your wife and kids walked through that door, and all of a sudden it's like freedom. But how many do you have that people that want to break through this terror barrier, and they don't because they're afraid, they don't think, and all of these different ideas begin to come into their head, and they begin to say these certain things, and as they begin to fire, what they do is they go right back to comfort. How many times have you done that in your life? Maybe it's a time where you're going to get a coach and hire a coach. or hire a mentor, or hire somebody that was going to help you, or maybe be a part of something that cost money. If I go back to 2006, I wanted to change the way I was doing things. And so I remember as it was clear as day, I remember standing in front of my bay window, looking out, saying, I need to do something different, but I didn't know what to do. I know I wanted to quit working with my hands and my back, and I wanted to work with my mind, but I wasn't sure where to go. So I thought about this guy that was in Oregon, and his name was William. And I thought, this guy's a multimillionaire. I've met him one or two times, or I've known of him, different events that we went to and different things like that. What happened was I thought, this is when I had the phone book back then. So it was a few years ago. And I opened up the phone book. And as I opened up the phone book, I looked and there was his name. And I thought, I wonder if I could call him and if he'd answer. So I called him expecting an answer machine, and he answered the phone. And I thought, oh my gosh, and so I finally got my words together, and I said, hey, I don't know if you know me or not, but my name is Dean Story. He says, yeah, I've heard of you, and blah blah blah, because we were from a small town in Oregon. And so anyway, I says, I think I'm looking for a mentor. I think I'm looking for somebody to help me, and I don't know what to do. And so he said, well, it sounds like you're looking for a coach. I says, I'm not sure. I don't even really understand what a coach does. And I said, I've been in business over 35 years to this day. I was raised in my dad's business when I was 8 years old. I thought I knew everything there was about business. So he said, why don't we meet for coffee at Starbucks and we'll talk. That was my first introduction to a coach, and he became my coach. And this is what I do for a living after 14 years. I'm still doing it. Here's the thing that happened with me. As I began to move in this direction, okay, I got a coach. Now this coach knows this somebody called Bob Proctor, and this Bob Proctor has a business partner called Paul Martinelli. And so these guys over in Vancouver putting on a seminar, and I go over to the seminar to meet Bob Proctor. I don't even know who Paul is. And so as I went over there and to meet Bob and to hear his stuff, I run into Paul and we get to talking. So he had me on the hook, right? He wanted me to become a life success consultant. And out of this, what happened was this whole process started. And I said, okay, so what's it going to cost? He told me, he says, well, it's going to cost $15,000. I said, you're crazy. Because see, I had the lack and limitation up here. And my barrier was financial. My barrier was I couldn't even imagine paying somebody $15,000 for me to be a part of their group. And I remember hanging up the phone, and I went back to my wife. She was sitting on the back porch, and she knew what I was doing. I wanted to make a change. I wanted to make a big change. And so as I looked at her and I said, she goes, how'd the call go? And I said, well, it went okay, but you know how much money they want? So they want $15,000. She goes, when are you going to start? She believed in me. She knew me. But I did too. I was scared to death. So I called up Paul and I said, you know what, Paul, I don't get this. I don't understand it. But I'm going to do it. I don't know how, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it afraid, like you always say. And so through that, believe it or not, there was a way made that I did that whole thing. And that was the first time that I put $15,000 into my head. Then I did it again, and I did it again to other groups. But here's this thing. It faces us all. It doesn't matter if you're Warren Buffett, Tony Robbins, Jack Canfield, Bob Proctor, John Maxwell. It doesn't matter. Every one of us, if we're going to move to that next level, if we're going to move to that next place, we hit the terror barrier. But if we begin to understand the process, if we understand the process, as we understand that this strange feeling happens, fear, worry, and doubt is a part of it. And we begin to understand on the other side of this terror barrier is freedom. You'll break through that wall. You'll do whatever it takes. See, money has nothing to do with what we want. Think about how stupid that statement sounds. Money has nothing to do with what you want. When you hear that statement, it takes your CD in your head and just scratches it. If you hear it long enough and more times, you're going to begin to believe it, that money has nothing to do with what you want. Why? Because when you want something bad enough, the money will show up. You know, in your life, you've had it happen to your circumstances. When you wanted something bad enough, the money showed up and you had that thing sitting in your living room or your driveway or whatever. So here's the thing. As a thank you for attending, I'll send you an exclusive invitation about how to receive my 50% off my new 90-day fast track breakthrough program. I've never, ever cut my programs this much, 50%. I'm doing it just because of this webinar. Maybe you're seeing it for the first time. Maybe it's on YouTube. Maybe some friend sent you this recording. I'm going to send you all the recording who's on this webinar today. And with that, I'm going to share a link with you where you can take and connect with me and maybe do a 15-minute discovery session and show you what this 90-day fast track breakthrough program is and how powerful it's going to be. Because see, if we're going to move to the next level, we want to have somebody that's going to walk along with us, right? So I know in the beginning of this webinar, it was kind of sketchy. Hopefully we can edit some of this stuff out. But for the most part, if you think about where you want to go and you think about why you want to get there, and as you begin to understand your why, as you begin to understand your why, understand your why. And the more you understand your why, what's going to happen is you're going to begin to uncover your purpose. When you uncover your purpose, every day is a Saturday. Think about what James Allen said. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. And he says, until thought is linked with purpose, there is no intelligent accomplishment. So I want to thank you all today for being on this webinar. I hope you got a little bit of value out of it. But realize this, the next time you go to move to that next level, you have to know what A is before you can move to B. If your A is fear of money, then understand that that's something that holds you back. It's weights, and you need to learn how to cut them off and move forward. Especially when you know why you want what you want, and all of a sudden, when you understand your purpose, it's like, here's a great quote. Fear knocked on the door, faith answered it, and lo and behold, there was nobody there. When you step into that place that you want to go to, when you step into that next level of understanding, when you move from point A to point B, and you know what point A is, and you know what you want over here, this is your goals, and you know what you want, and all of a sudden, the people that you need, circumstances, and environment all begin to come to you, and it's like that vibration that begins to happen. So I just want to thank everybody for showing up today, and hopefully you got something out of it. I will be sending you a link to sign up for a 15-minute discovery session to see how you can receive 50% off of my new coaching program. So have a great day. Thanks.